right, continuing what we were doing on Monday, we are building our poster. And what we did Monday is we really worked on our type design. So I have my text blocking sketch here. I have inspiration here. Neither of those things is required, but they can get you to a much better result. The first requirement is what we were working on through these first 4 videos on Monday, and that is to get a vector and that vector is going to be a finished black shape text treatment. Just in black shapes of the type you want. So this is built on a text blocking sketch. I know a 16 by 20 rectangle for my poster and how it's going to interact with my spot illustration. I can do it with either my finished spot illustration or with a sketch of my spot illustration. But at this point, I am customizing and modifying this typeface. And the way I got this typeface, if you remember, was by using external typefaces, mostly sourced from places like DaFont. Oops, I don't need to hit return. So let me do a quick reminder of that. So if I go up in the assignment, I'll see one of the skills is not just understanding how kerning works and how typesetting works and how important layout is with text, with images, but also how to modify existing text resources, right? And so DaFont.com is one place you can find such things. And these are just recently downloaded ones. And there are just thousands and thousands of different custom typefaces. Remember, fonts are variations on typefaces like bold or italic. And I'll look at old school. Let's see. We have a lot of scripts here. Retro vintage look interesting. So if I was interested in that, I could type my own text into that, right? Submit it, and then see how it looks in its variations. And especially, you have to be careful with script fonts or script typefaces. You see how they all beautifully connect here? Even if I type in exactly that, retro vintage, and I submit it, this is made to work with capitals and then lowercase. But if I do all capitals, you see how the kerning doesn't quite work, right? So everything usually has to be hand adjusted. So for my Nico, all in capitals, this doesn't really work as a solution, right? Now I could try different variations, but I don't want to give those choices. That's pretty nicely designed, but it doesn't really go with my illustration, right? But retro vintage, it's a really good one. That's why it's had 224,000 downloads. And then these would be font versions of it. So this is kind of a bold shadow version of the original. Now, instead of, I'll just use this as an example, instead of actually downloading the typeface and installing it, which is how most people use DaFont, right? You download the OTF, the OpenType file, you install it on your computer, you can use it in Illustrator, you can use it in Photoshop, you can use it in Microsoft Word. We are learning kind of a more direct way, which is to just make it pretty large on the screen, as you see here. I don't know why this is so low res. And then just do a screen grab of it, of just the title treatment you want. Then we can modify that title treatment. I'm just going to go through all the steps that can be helpful. In Photoshop or Photopea, a raster program, well, it's still pixel-based. So for instance, if I want to put this with my illustration, but I want it to be more curvy, I can warp it, right? With all those kind of skills. So very psychedelic. But I really do like the negative space around the I with the N. That's pretty cool. Okay, this is what's called modifying an existing typeface. Even though it started as this, I have now modified it a little bit. And now I'm going to modify it even more. So if I save that, it's just a JPEG. It's changed here, right? Now I'm going to open that in Adobe Illustrator, because the goal is with our black type is we're going to change it into a vector. Right now this is very clearly pixel based, right? Pretty low resolution, not really useful for anything. But if I want to turn it into a vector, I go to I click on it first so it's highlighted. I go to properties, and then I go to image trace. And this is how we can convert any pixel based image into a vector. We only learn in this class how to convert into one color vectors. So when we make vectors, whether they're logos, whether they're type, you can think of it as a logo type, right? We are doing them with just one fill color, and that's going to be black. So I go to image trace and I go to the options, and you'll notice there is no one color option. There's what's called silhouettes, but silhouettes, I don't really like the defaults for that. So the default we use is black and white logo. And black and white logo, then we open up the defaults, because unfortunately that is black with white. So you see how it's showing us black shapes and white vector shapes. Now we want it to ignore that background color. So we do that in the advanced options. And then we can preview it. You see now it has no white. And it looks pretty good. And I can modify it more here if I want it to be a little bit thicker. I can do that. If I want it to be a little bit smoother, I can lower the number of paths, right? But then once I'm happy with it, I hit expand. And expand is what changes it into a vector that I can then further modify or use. And what might I need to do? Well, you see here it gets a little blip in it, so I'm just going to use my pencil tool, start on the path, end on the path, smooth that out. Okay, now this might be my finished black type design if this went well with my poster, which I'm not convinced it does, right? But this is just to catch you up on everything we've been doing. So how would I save it? Once you're done with your black type, you're going to save it as the 3 vector formats we've learned. So we're going to save as, first, always onto our computer. And I'll just call these test type. First as an AI file, an Adobe Illustrator file. I'll just save these to the desktop. That's your working file format, so you can always open it up in Illustrator, keep modifying it. Next is as a transferable vector file. So save as to your computer, or you can do save a copy. And this is going to be Adobe's transferable vector format. And that is called an EPS. Save that to the desktop. That's what I'm going to use in Photoshop, because Photopea isn't working on campus. And then the third type, whenever you save as a vector, you want to save it as also an SVG. An SVG just stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. That's the most kind of universal transferable vector format. Just before you save it as an SVG, make sure that it all fits within an artboard. Otherwise, parts of it will be cropped. All right. So there we have it as our EPS, right? And that EPS can be brought on not just to Photoshop files. That vector format can be brought on into Illustrator files as well, right? And now I have a new vector that I can modify that looks like this. So pretty easy. But because that's just kind of a nice use of the letters, it doesn't fit the character or what I'm going for my poster. That's where the text blocking sketch comes in. So I'm not using this one. Instead, I'm working on creating this one from assets that were modified. So this is a more extreme modification of found sources. All right, so how do I modify? Well, first of all, you can control each individual letter, right? You can click on it. They're each their own separate vectors. And then you can use the large selection tool, the black arrow, to rotate them, to scale them, basically transform them. I'm going to show you a few nice tricks that are in Illustrator as well that I haven't shown you yet. So we already know that if you click with the small selection tool, you can select individual anchor points and move them. Right? So if I just want to widen that, I can do that with just that one anchor point. And I can take this one, just select that one anchor point and move it. Right. But what if I wanted to drag down the whole bottom half of this letter? What I could use is the lasso tool. And I have to find it. There it is. So it's underneath the small selection. So if you choose the lasso tool, then just like the lasso tool in Photoshop, you just drag around the portion of the vector path that you want to modify, and it will select only those anchor points that were within what you lassoed. I know it doesn't look like much, but then if I use the small selection tool, right, and drag, it will drag all of them together instead of just one. Does that make sense? So that's a really nice way to modify type as well if I want this in to just be a little bit more robust. And you can see how I can kind of shift it on itself, right? Because all those anchor points that are holding still, those are the anchor points that I didn't lasso around. Ooh. That is the direct selection tool, or what I call the small selection, the white arrow. So this is how you do it. So first of all, I can click on a vector shape with the white arrow, and that's what shows me all the anchor points, which then allows me to redraw it with the pencil. But if I want to just move one anchor point, like I want to drop down the corner of this eye, this is how you do it. It's a little weird. If I try to click it right here, it won't do it. It will move the whole thing. But if I click off of it and then hover over it until just that anchor point is highlighted, then it will isolate it. So I can just move that or change the curve on it. And remember, you can always do Command Z in Illustrator. And then here's another nice trick. Once I have something selected with all the anchor points, I can also do overall modifications to it. One of my favorites to do with type is Object, Path, Simplify. This is kind of like what you are able to do while you are image tracing. But this is after it's already a vector. So what does Object, Path, Simplify do? It gives you this little slider, and you can say, I want it to be simpler. So this is kind of like smoothing everywhere at once. Now, if you make it too simple, you're going to lose certain aspects you might like. And then the most complex is just keeping the number of points you have. So that can sometimes be an interesting way. Like say I don't want 24 anchor points, I only want 11. And 11 is kind of the fewest I can have. And then it just softens between them. All right, the other way you can play with it is with the rounding tools. So these have sharp edges, right? But if I select all of it, and then I grab one of these rounders, it will round all of them for me. So if I want to just slightly round this, which I think might be nice, I can do that. And then I can do that for this as well. Just slightly round it. For this as well, just slightly round it. And it will do it on all corners that it's able to. This doesn't have any rounds, right? Because it doesn't have any sharp edges. You only get the rounding option when you have a straight vector going into a straight vector. And that kind of splits the difference. Now, ultimately, what is your easiest way to modify type? It is to use the pencil tool, and I like to do it with the tablets that are open at the back, and to simply start on the path